Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
Oh, yeah.
Before he even had a chance to give his opening statement, a motion to adjourn was brought by a Liberal member, and it was granted. Because it didn't fit with their narrative. And their narrative has been, literally since Justin Trudeau took government, is there's nothing to see here. Absolutely nothing to see here. We've made mistakes. We've offered partial apologies. But trust us when we say there's nothing to see here. I can't accept that. And I know my colleagues on this side of the room can't accept that either.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Question Period Canada. How y'all doing? Larry Brock is a man on fire, one of my favorites to watch. He's in committee again, bringing so much evidence against Trudeau's obstructions of justice, foreign interference, meddling, just being in the way, and calls him a liar in here a couple of times as well, which is pretty interesting. So we're going to check out Larry Brock. This is a long piece, but there is a lot of evidence against Trudeau in this piece that he delivers here. You'll like Larry Brock. Anyhow, we'll check you later in the video. Let's take a listen to Larry Brock. He's a man on fire.
On the motion. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and I thank my colleague, Mr. Barrett, for his thorough review and rationale as to why he personally has concerns with limiting the ability of this committee to do its important work. And at first blush, I really don't need time to review the content of my colleague Mr. Green's motion, because I'm certainly not in favor of that. We have to take a step back from time to time and remind ourselves why we're here. And we're here because Canadians in our constituencies voted to put us here, to be their voice, to do the necessary work, not only within our communities, but also here in the nation's capital. And we're all privileged to be on this particular committee, one of the most important committees that government operations have, because we are in the position to study the actions of others and to determine whether or not laws have been broken. And Canadians expect us to do the work year-round. They certainly understand the necessity of having personal time with our families. And when you take a look at the actual parliamentary calendar, we have an abundant amount of time to spend not only with our families, but with our constituents. In fact, it's a running sort of point of contention between myself and my spouse, who quite often is supportive of the work that I do here on the Hill, but misses the old Larry Brock, where although he could be busy throughout the day in courts, you miss him too? Thank you. She and my children had comfort in knowing that I would return to the house in the evening and wake up in the house in the morning. It is a difficult task being a parliamentarian, and we probably all have similar stories with our respective families. It's an ebb and it's a flow, and there are good times and there are bad times, but ultimately the job entails us to be away at significant points of time. But when you look at the entire calendar, and this is how I justify it to my spouse, quite often goes in one ear and out the other, but I think she listens to it and understands the rationale. I'm actually working here in Ottawa less than I was actually inside a courtroom. We have a very generous summer break. We have an extremely generous Christmas break. We are off at Thanksgiving. We are off at March break, often 2 weeks at a time. We are off during the May holidays. So when you take a look at the actual amount of time we are here doing the work of parliamentarians, it really begs the question that the Canadians don't have that same sort of privileges that we have. They're working largely through the entire year, and depending on the nature of their employment, they might be able to secure 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks of summer holidays throughout the entire year, the usual statutory holidays throughout the year. Parliamentarians are different. So when I take a look at the nature of this motion, what message am I communicating with my constituents that my 2.5 months of summer vacation is more important to me and to my family than doing the work of parliamentarians here in Ottawa, particularly when we've got dark clouds of unethical, scandalous, and corrupt behavior by this government. There was a point in time in the last 6 or 7 months where I often remarked, pretty much every other week or so, another scandal erupts from this government. But lately, it's almost on a daily basis. There are nuances that are coming out of scandals that we have been studying in numerous committees. And I just read a recent report in one of the nationals that made the conclusion, or drew the conclusion that I totally agree with, that unfortunately this is just the tip of the iceberg at the level of this corruption in the Justin Trudeau government. So I can well imagine, without even taking a straw poll of constituents in my riding, if I said my 2.5 months trumps the purpose by which you sent me to Ottawa, they would be appalled at that. And I think as adults and as parliamentarians, we can talk and walk, we can chew and walk, chew gum and walk at the same time, is what I'm trying to say. We can spend the quality time that we need with our families. We can spend the quality time that we need in our constituencies. But we can come back from time to time to do the important work of this committee to get to the bottom of these scandals. I'm not saying that we're going to complete this, Mr. Chair, by the end of the summer. But by completely shutting off our ability to conduct work unless it's an emergency under 106.4, I think misses the point. And as I've indicated, I have been party to a number of committees where I have been parachuted in to examine the multitude of scandals. And let's face it, even on the SNC Lavalin scandal, okay, we haven't even got to the bottom of that yet. We had the RCMP commissioner, and I can't remember the actual date, but I believe it was this committee, before I was a permanent member of this committee. We invited the RCMP commissioner to attend, and it didn't meet the agenda of the Liberal Party of Canada. It didn't meet the agenda of the members opposite to me. And I seem to recall that it may have been even on a break week, because this committee has sat on a number of occasions during break weeks. And I remember the RCMP commissioner, before he even had a chance to give his opening statement, a motion to adjourn was brought by a Liberal member, and it was granted, because it didn't fit with their narrative. And their narrative has been, literally since Justin Trudeau took government, is there's nothing to see here. Absolutely nothing to see here. We've made mistakes. We've offered partial apologies. But trust us when we say there's nothing to see here. I can't accept that. And I know my colleagues on this side of the room can't accept that either. On the SNC matter, lingering questions. And I know that I'm going to have the ability, hopefully, at some point today, depending on the length of time by which we are voting this afternoon, to try to try to close the circle and deal with the hanging threads with the RCMP commissioner, who's coming to public accounts for 2 hours. And I know he had testified here earlier, but there were a number of outstanding questions that were not answered satisfactorily. For instance, why did it take literally 5 years for the RCMP to conclude that there was no probable case to charge Justin Trudeau with obstruction of justice? And the convoluted way that they tried to demonstrate the inability to close out their investigation from a former prosecutor's perspective, it was challenging to truly appreciate what they were saying. There was a changing narrative with respect to their onus. They were conflating their onus with the Crown onus in terms of producing evidence to convince a trier of fact of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That has been and never will be the prerogative of police agencies. Their sole mandate, which is an extremely low standard, is that is there reasonable and probable grounds? For instance, is there reasonable and probable grounds to believe Justin Trudeau should be charged with the criminal offense of obstruction of justice? There are two facets to the prosecution of obstruction of justice. One is, what is the actus reus? What is the actus reus? What did he do to obstruct justice? And I think the evidence is abundantly clear. It's unchallenged. It's confirmed in the report by former Commissioner Dion that he had a political agenda. And he knew that there was a tool available to his then first Indigenous female Attorney General, Minister of Justice, to intervene in the decision made by the Director of Public Prosecutions not to offer SNC Lavalin, who is facing corruption and bribery charges, very serious charges in this country for which, upon conviction, could have landed executives serving a prison sentence. He wanted Jody Wilson-Raybould to deviate from her prosecutorial independence and intervene in that decision to offer the deferred prosecution agreement. This was in September of 2017. And for those who remember, and I know that my colleague, Mr. Cooper, actually had the privilege of questioning Jody Wilson-Raybould at committee, and that was followed up with her writing a book. I have read that cover to cover, and it's appalling at the lengths by which our Prime Minister cross the line between interference, obstruction, and allowing her to exercise her independence. She made it abundantly clear to him during that first meeting. That first meeting in September, for those who have read the book, and she may have highlighted this in her testimony, was to discuss a number of other issues, particularly her priorities as it relates to Indigenous matters. Justin Trudeau came into that meeting red hot. He had no intention of discussing any other issue, particularly Indigenous issues, other than SNC-Lavalin. He reminded her of a couple of things. He reminded her of a pending provincial election in Quebec that he felt would be very problematic if this multinational corporation was still subject to criminal prosecution in Canada. And more importantly, and damning, I would suggest, he reminded Jody Wilson-Raybould that he was the member for Papineau, the riding by which SNC had its headquarters. And when Jody said, "Are you asking me to make a decision contrary to a decision I already made? Are you interfering in my decision?" For any impartial observer of what took place during that discussion, the proverbial fly in the wall, you would conclude absolutely the Prime Minister of a G7 nation preferred the interests of a corrupt corporation and wanted his Attorney General, who wore two hats, which begs the question about the utility of a two-hat minister moving forward. He wanted her to make that decision in his favor and in the favor of SNC. He backed off, of course, and said, "Oh, no, of course, that decision is yours." But the damage was done. That was the actus reus. That was the act by which he, then followed by PMO staff, then followed by ministerial staff in other departments, ultimately concluding with former Privy Council clerk Michael Warnock, unknown to him, being audio taped in that fateful telephone discussion, meeting I should say, in December of 2017. Commissioner Dion clearly articulates and outlines all of the attempts to interfere in her decision-making. Jody Wilson-Raybould truly demonstrated the integrity that you'd expect from an Attorney General who probably felt immense pressure as a member of the Justin Trudeau cabinet. She was mindful of her dual role, and she held firm. Michael Warnock came into that meeting, again, red hot. The purpose, according to Jody Wilson-Raybould, was to discuss, again, other issues. Those other issues were never discussed. Michael Warnock came in hot and made it known to Jody Wilson-Raybould on more than one occasion that the Prime Minister was adamant about this. Now, why is that term adamant important? For the lawyers in this committee, you'll remark, for those who practice criminal law, about the second aspect of prosecutions. We talked about the actus reus. Now we have the mens rea, and that is the intent. and the obstruction of justice is a specific intent offense. So when Michael Warnock comes in to this meeting red hot and references the Prime Minister on more than one occasion being adamant that he is going to find a solution one way or another, is indicative of intent. That is the only plausible legal definition of what the Prime Minister had instructed Michael Warnock to do. Now, Michael Warnock testified and would have everyone believe, as nonsensical as this is, that he took it upon his own self to initiate the meeting. And he was not directed by the Prime Minister in any which way or form to, again, put that final element of pressure on her, which is just preposterous. No one believes that. He lied. So when I take a look from a former prosecutor's perspective, the charge of obstruction of justice, I'm mindful of the case law that exists in this particular area, and I can't remember the name of the case, but it came out of the Supreme Court of Canada, which set out the essential elements to the offense of obstruction, and it made it abundantly clear that success to the obstruction is not necessary. An attempt is all that is necessary. And that's exactly what we had in this particular case. Jody Wilson-Raybould held her own, maintained her position, never deviated from that position. Next thing you know, she's facing a cabinet shuffle. Again, a preposterous explanation offered by the Prime Minister and his government that it was because of the sudden resignation of Treasury Board President Scott Bryson. Was she the only high-profile minister that could have filled that role? I don't think so. No one believes that for a minute. She was demoted because she had the audacity to say no to Justin Trudeau. Take a look in history to all the MPs who've said no to Justin Trudeau, who proclaims that he is a feminist prime minister. Another blatant lie. Let's take a look at MP, I'm going to probably mispronounce her name. Is it Selena Chavez?
Selena Caesar Chavez.
Chavez, okay? Had great difficulty with the Prime Minister during her entire tenure. Ultimately felt that he was pressuring her in ways that she was completely uncomfortable with. Again, this feminist Prime Minister showed her the door, just like he ultimately showed our first Indigenous Attorney General. Had no difficulty as well with the excellent work that was done by Cabinet Minister Jane Philpott. I believe she was Minister of Health at the time. Her mistake, what was her crime? Her crime was supporting Jody Wilson-Raybould. Supporting her and suggesting that no, the Prime Minister was completely out of line. Absolutely out of line. She was shown the door. And then I remember, I wasn't a parliamentarian back then, but I remember how gleefully the Liberal government and its backbenchers were just gleefully clapping on television in front of all of Canada. Okay, and Mr. Baines is smiling as well, but he wasn't there. But maybe had he been there, he might have been smiling and clapping as well. But I said to myself, what are you so damn happy about? What are you smiling about, Justin Trudeau? You're Canada's first feminist Prime Minister. And here you are clapping like a seal to celebrate the demise of a very strong, two strong cabinet ministers who had the strength to say no to Justin Trudeau. That's what happens. That's what happens to Liberal MPs who have the audacity to challenge the almighty wisdom of Justin Trudeau. So you're right. I'm absolutely right to have these questions still percolating in my mind why the RCMP did not complete the task when the evidence was right there. I'm also mindful of the fact that Michael Wernick had shared with us not too long ago that this particular issue was never discussed at Cabinet. Wonder if people remember around this table that actual piece of evidence. It was never discussed at Cabinet, yet we heard from the RCMP Commissioner that his request for documents were blocked by Justin Trudeau and the government because of Cabinet confidences. Well, if there were no discussions at Cabinet, then there were no confidences. So that's another issue I need to raise with Commissioner Duhem this afternoon, because I didn't have that information available to me when he first attended. Why was it important for Commissioner Dion to interview 14 people, literally anyone who had something to say about the SNC-Lavalin matter, but the RCMP in their infinite wisdom decided to limit that to 4 individuals? Can you say that that was a thorough investigation? I think not. And again, when I posed that question to them and their nonsensical response to it certainly didn't satisfy myself, and I'm sure didn't satisfy Canadians. And for those at this table who remember my final question to the Commissioner at that time, is I phrased it in such a way that you'll forgive me, Commissioner, when I say to you that your handling of this investigation can only lead to the inevitable conclusion that there exists a 2-tier level of justice in this country, particularly as it relates to Justin Trudeau. He, his deputy, and other members have responded to committees that no one is above the law, and that no one includes Justin Trudeau. And although no sitting Prime Minister has ever been charged with a criminal offense, the RCMP has left the door slightly ajar. And I don't have the actual verbiage, the words in front of me, but the report that I had access to when I questioned our current Attorney General at Committee of the Whole concluded that the RCMP would continue the investigation if they had access to further documents. I'm going to explore with the Commissioner what that means when he attends. We've already satisfied the issue regarding Cabinet confidences that obviously was not discussed. And what does it say to Canadians? What does it say to Canadians under investigation? Can they simply refuse to cooperate with law enforcement? Would they have the same ability to shut down an investigation like Justin Trudeau did by simply refusing to hand over documents? I think Justin Trudeau is the only Canadian in this country that has that ability. And apparently that's okay with the RCMP. I can tell you emphatically, Mr. Chair, that it's not okay to Canadians. Absolutely not. As I've indicated at the outset, the obstruction of justice charge is not a difficult prosecution. And I put this to the Commissioner that I've actually I've dealt with cases where the police have investigated a historical homicide have put together thousands of pages of disclosure, a trial that literally took maybe a couple of years to start, a trial that may have lasted 30 or 45 days. I have personally completed far more serious prosecutions than an obstruction of justice charge. So it really begs the question, why did they delay for the years that they did, other than they had no political will to charge as sitting prime minister? Are they truly independent? Well, the RCMP Act may differ on that issue. Section 4 of the RCMP Act makes it abundantly clear that they report to the Minister of Public Safety. And it's the government that actually appoints the commissioner. Begs the question, how independent can you be under those circumstances? These are the questions I get from Canadians from across this country. These are the questions I get from my constituents. Now, I look at the time. I have many more thoughts in my mind on a multitude of other scandals, but I'm going to cede my time now to my colleague, Mr. Cooper. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brock.
Hey gang, so there we go, another wild and crazy committee video. We always get to see the best here. Larry Brock, Shannon Stubbs, Rick Perkins, Michael Barrett, Michael Cooper, Melissa Lantzman, Josh Rush, Halon. There's a long list, guys. I just mentioned only a few of the names. These committee videos, guys, are wild. We'll be covering Canadian federal politics, sharing that with you. Like, subscribe, share, get notified, all those fun things. Leave a comment. I do love the comments. That's it. We'll be back with more information to share and probably another committee video or two coming down the pipes. Remember to like and subscribe. It does help. My name's Aaron. This is Question Period Canada. Catch you next video. Thank you for watching this one.